This week on the Hollywood in Total podcast, I share my review of Snow White. Yeah, the Snow White with Rachel Zegler. And I'm as shocked as anyone by my reaction. And we talk to the filmmakers behind The Coddling of the American Mind. It is a provocative new documentary that looks at what's happening in college campuses. It's ugly, but we just can't look away.
Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Entertainment news and reviews without the woke Hollywood narrative. Free speech, free expression. Now that's entertainment. And here's your host, award-winning film critic, Christian Toto.
I am contractually obligated to hate Snow White, right? I mean, I'm a conservative film critic. The movie's been under fire for about 2 years now, give or take, from people on the right, comments that Rachel Zegler made, comments from Disney saying we can't put dwarfs in the movie. It's not exactly kosher in 2025. There's been so much said about this movie. And a lot of my friends in the right of center landscape, from YouTubers to podcasters, they've been just absolutely attacking the movie for months and months at a time. So I have to hate it, right? I mean, it's my job. I'm a conservative film critic. I can't give this a rave, but I hadn't seen it yet. And now that I have to say, kind of liked it.
That's shocking.
Thought it was charming. Not Prince Charming, just straightforward charming. Yeah, this update is certainly woke on paper. The Snow White character isn't just front and center. She is the heroine here. She must save the day. And yes, there's a prince-like figure who's in the story, but he really doesn't command much of anything. This is Rachel Zegler being her Rachel Zegler-est. And the third act of the film really does compromise the original story to push it in that direction. Again, I can't deny any of that. But I also can't deny I found it engaging. I enjoyed Rachel Zegler. She's got a lovely voice and she's a strong presence in the film. I like the dwarves. Yes, there's CGI, and I think they should have gone with actual little people playing these roles. But as it stands, I thought they were perfectly fine. And I actually thought a subplot where Snow White kind of helps with Dopey's self-esteem, I thought it was really sweet. And I think a lot of the movie is sweet.
You're the biggest liar I've ever met.
Now, there's been so much behind the scenes going on here. There were lots of reshoots, apparently. You just can't see it on screen. It doesn't feel like a movie that's been fixed in the editing room. And that's to the credit of all the filmmakers here. Whatever they did, they made it seem as if this was the original concept. So I didn't hate it. The musical numbers are perfectly fine. Some of the supporting performances, again, good. I liked Gal Gadot as the evil queen, even though most of my fellow film critics despise her in it. I don't quite get it. But I have to call it like I see it. And that's what I'm doing. And, you know, I've actually taken some heat on social media for that. I'm a right of center film critic. Why am I saying that Snow White is actually pretty good? A lot of people on Twitter were saying, yeah, I'm not going to see it. I don't care what you say. And some are a little bit crueler than that for me daring to like it. And listen, I'm a big boy. I can take the slings and arrows, especially on social media. That's the way the landscape is.
Because someone is bullying you, and you never let a bully win.
But I also don't want to be that critic, the person who's on the right and only likes right of center movies or apolitical movies. If I see a left of center film, I have to automatically say, this stinks, no way. Avoid at all costs. I just can't do that. But, you know, a critic has to do his job and just call balls and strikes. And that's what I'm trying to do with the movie. I acknowledge its flaws. And as a right of center film critic in my official review at HollywoodInToto.com, I do lay out what has been changed, why it's different, and why it does really overlap with Disney's more woke agenda, which again has been shrinking in recent months, but is certainly there all the same. Given all of that, I can't maybe get more clicks on YouTube or even on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast by saying what I'm saying. It sort of goes against my brand in a way. But again, I gotta be who I am and be honest with the audience. Now, I think that word of mouth will be rather good in this movie. I think little girls are going to adore Snow White and the whole story here. And I think that families will appreciate some of the messages in it about being kind and decent and open and generous. All the things that the evil queen is not.
I'm not bad.
But having said all that, you know, I think that's part of the problem we find in our tribalistic culture, where you have to kind of pick a side, stay in that side, and be loyal to that side. But I think often the more honest conversations happen in the middle. And again, I am right of center unabashedly so. but I'm not going to fall for that time after time after time. Got to be honest, got to be straightforward. That's what matters. Having said all that, I think this movie will underperform at the box office. It's doing it as we speak. I think that the film will probably have legs. Most kids' films do at the box office. Parents are always looking for an excuse to kind of shove the kids away for just 2 hours so they can actually get the work done, clean the laundry and do the dishes and just do the shopping and all the little chores that pop up during the day. And if the kids can have a gay old time while that's happening, all the better. But, in a way, this movie and the kerfuffle around it reminded me a little bit of the Lady Ghostbusters from 2016.
So, Abby, I've been doing a lot of thinking, and congratulations, I've decided to become a Ghostbuster.
Now, that movie was coming out, hadn't even hit theaters yet, and it became a culture war touchstone. There were people who were saying, you must like the movie. To not like the movie meant you were some sort of a bigot. There were major journalistic institutions telling us that if you didn't like the Ghostbusters trailer, and it was awful, you were a misogynist. That actually happened. And I feel like in a way that culture war battle is a bookend to this one. We've got Snow White, we've got Disney backpedaling on its heels for a movie, for a live action adaptation of one of their most beloved animated films. Something's changing in the culture. Maybe back in 2016, if Disney had come out with Snow White then, they would have stood tall. They would have resisted any sort of right of center criticisms about the movie. They would have just gone straight ahead. But not today. We're seeing Disney backpedal on a lot of fronts. The recent Moana 2 and Inside Out 2, they were completely apolitical. The recent Win or Lose TV show that's on Disney Plus took out a trans character, and now there's a Christian character in the story. I don't know if he or she was originally planned, but isn't that a sea change as well? But I think Disney's learning the hard way. If you insult your audience, if you take an iconic brand and you trash it, whether directly or indirectly, or maybe directly when it comes to Rachel Zegler, there are consequences. Just be kind, be positive, be forthcoming. Say we're looking forward to more people seeing Snow White, and leave it at that. I think Rachel Zegler, at least I hope she's learned some valuable lessons about this process. Doesn't mean we want to clamp down on her free speech, not at all. But if you're an actress trying to promote the film, don't trash the source material. Don't attack half the country for voting the way they did. I think we'll look back at this whole Snow White debacle with a lot of lessons learned. But at the end of the day, I found the movie was pretty good. And I think that's ultimately what film audiences want. So if you see it, if you dislike it, if you love it, please let me know in the comments section, or just go to hollywoodintoto.com. You can weigh in on my official review there, see what you think. But the bottom line is one that we've learned for quite some time. Go woke, go broke. It's a maxim as old as time itself, or at least from 2016. Adam Carolla has one thing in mind when he talks about his children. He's got twins. They're roughly 18 or so years old now, entering adulthood. He wants them to have grit.
We can handle anything they've got.
Not fame, not fortune, but grit. Now, we all want to protect our children. We all want to kind of make sure they don't get bumps and bruises. They don't get insulted on the playground. They don't get pressure from outside forces. We want their lives to be as smooth as possible. But having said all that, when they do experience hardships, when they do have bullies at school or find some other situations where they're not treated well, they have to process that too. And going through those obstacles and those bumps in the road, well, it gives them grit. Now, the movie I'm about to talk about is the opposite of that. Sometimes people and children are coddled, and the coddling of the American mind explores that directly, and it's pretty chilling.
I was full of self-confidence when I was 18. But while I was in college, that disintegrated.
Mental health among Gen Z is a travesty. Almost every other person I know has some sort of mental health problem.
The new documentary looks at college life and how college institutions are warping the minds of young people. It's not about politics per se, but it is about microaggressions.
But even I'm offended by this stuff.
It is about white supremacy. It is about saying you're not equal. You're living in a country that is going to treat you as a less than equal person, and you have to behave accordingly. Matter of fact, you might as well give up, because the microaggressions, they're all around us. It is a fascinating look at culture, and it's through the eyes of several students who didn't know what to expect when they came to school, except they really wanted to have great debates and encounter new ideas. But what they learned is there wasn't much room for debate. They couldn't say what they wanted to say. And the ideas in question, well, you had to follow a certain path and not deviate from your path. Now, the movie itself is based on a book from about 2015 by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff, and it explores this topic in great detail. Now, of course, the movie can't go into as depth as that book does, but it does plumb this material in fascinating ways. So I wanted to have the filmmakers on the show, and it turns out I've gotten to know them a little bit over the years. It's Ted and Courtney Balaker, and if you don't know the names, you probably know their movies. Little Pink House, which was sensational from a few years ago, and also Can We Take a Joke, which came out just before the woke revolution was really hitting its stride. That was a movie about, people being upset and offended by jokes and what consequences there were for comedians who told those wrong jokes. So they're back with The Coddling of the American Mind. It's a terrific movie, an important movie, I'd say. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Ted and Courtney Balaker, talented filmmakers making movies that should be out in the marketplace but often aren't. Don't you love independent filmmakers? They just kind of plug the gaps where they can. And before long, I'm sure you'll be dying to see The Coddling of the American Mind, and you should. It's a good movie. Well, Ted and Courtney, thanks for joining the show. I love the work you do, and you're also very thoughtful and cautious about. You don't have a million movies. You make a few every few years, and they're very concise and they're very targeted and they're very important. But obviously, when a subject matter comes at you, and you both say we need to make this into a movie, it's considerable. So we'll start there. Obviously, this book is fascinating. Obviously, the subject matter is a little scary, certainly intriguing, certainly something we should know about. But what was the kind of the impetus or the spark that went from, hey, isn't that interesting, to this needs to be our next movie?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having us, Christian. It's always great to talk with you. So we read the book when it came out, and about 2/3 of the way through the book, there's a very bracing tale where a man talks about almost committing suicide, and he goes into great detail about how he almost did that. That man was Greg Lukianoff, one of the authors of the book, also happens to be a friend of ours, and your fans may know him from FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, where he's the CEO and president. And so Courtney and I were thinking to ourselves, my goodness, if someone like Greg, who seems to have his act together, was really struggling with demons like this, and we, his friends didn't even know about it, this is probably a bigger deal, probably happens more often, where we have this perception of people who seemingly have their act together, seemingly are happy, but there's something darker going on behind the scenes. That was a big issue. And then another issue lives with us. It's our 10-year-old son. And he's a Gen Alpha, as we've recently realized. And so we had, on the one hand, one very personal reason with Greg and another very personal reason with our son, because although the book and the movie focuses most directly on Gen Z, this is a problem that's going to bedevil all generations, including the next one. That's our son's generation. So it's really crucial that we turn things around for Gen Z and for the next generation as well.
It's a great point. I thought a lot about my extended family as I was watching the film, and I thought, wow, this is interesting. I actually want to share it with another family member and make sure that they see it as well, because it is important. Courtney, go ahead. Think you were going to jump in?
Oh, well, yeah, just to piggyback off of what Ted was saying, we've known Greg Lukianoff for a long time, and all the incredible work he does with college students and college campuses, mainly focused on free speech. But then when he really shifted his work into something that was so personal to him, his own mental health crisis, his own brush with near suicide, and what saved him and pulled him out of that incredible darkness was cognitive behavioral therapy, which really forced him to examine his own brain. Why does my brain go into these thought cycles? Why does my brain keep telling me these things that, if I really put on trial, aren't true? And a lot of people do that. We all do that. That's not just Gen Z. That's everybody. And the trick to not let it overcome you and to defeat you is to understand it more. And so he really started to focus on himself, but then he saw these young people doing exactly what he was doing as a man in his 30s, the way they were thinking, the cognitive dissonance and catastrophizing, and the us versus them, and thinking the world's against me, or I'm a bad person because something didn't go right. All these things that are very normal, that don't necessarily mean that they're true. Mm-hmm. And he said, I need to talk about what's happening on college campus, because the rates of suicide and depression among that generation are staggeringly high. And the good news is it's preventable. We can pull these young people out of it, and we can hopefully protect our son's generation, and hopefully many generations, by just teaching them these really important life skills and mind skills.
You know, the heart of the film to me are the young people who share their stories. They are all remarkable. They're such lovely human beings. I just, my heart breaks for each one of them. They're so eloquent. Obviously, that's not easy to find, those kind of students who could be so open and honest and raw. Was that one of the bigger challenges of the film? And how did you get these kids? Because they really are just amazing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you had that reaction, Christian. That's really what we found the reaction to be among so many viewers. And it was very much a challenge to find students like that. There's no, predetermined pathway to find someone like Saeed or Kimmy or Ariane or Lucy or Anna. And so it required a lot of hard work, and some amount of luck too. You just keep digging and digging and digging, and once you find somebody like a Saeed or an Ariane, you know that you want to ask them to be in your movie. And it's just so crucial, because as you saw, what's going on college campuses right now is a travesty. Yeah. And if they were giving out a drug that made people miserable, there would be massive lawsuits. But it's not a drug. It's like you're signing up, you're paying a lot of money to get like the worst therapist in the world for 4 to 7 years. And you can see it in someone like Lucy or someone like Kimmy. These are, for the folks who haven't seen the movie, these were people who were very well adjusted before going to college. In Kimmy's case, she was an immigrant from Africa, came to America, loved it, thought it was great. And then about 6 months into college, she thinks, not only is America the worst place ever, but she's miserable. She goes through all the, just the kind of mental turmoil you wouldn't hope on anyone. And it's, as Courtney said, it's preventable. And finally, we're starting to see some light shown on what's going on in college campuses. Although I got to say, for all the bluster about how bad college is, you don't hear a whole lot about microaggressions, for instance, really the specific things that are going on. So even if DEI is all deleted tomorrow, what's to stop these professors from teaching microaggression, therapy, quote unquote, or microaggression training tomorrow? It's a very twisted way to view the world, and it makes everybody miserable, not just the white and conservative kids. What we show in our movie is that DEI and this twisted worldview hurts the Black, brown, and disabled students that are supposedly the ones who are supposed to be helped the most by all this. So where does that leave this grand, creation that the university has given us? If it doesn't even help those people, if it turns them into miserable people, then why are we doing this?
Yeah. I think one of the most stirring parts of the film, one of the students you interview was so despondent over President Trump's election in 2016. I mean, she just thought that her life would be over in some capacity. And I without getting too personal, I mean, I look at my Facebook feed today and I see a lot of friends who I care for dearly who are left of center. And it's like she wrote their Facebook, listen, Trump is blustery and he's flawed and he's got all these big character skills and deficits. And I don't acknowledge all of that, but I don't think we're all going away tomorrow. And yet there's this sense of doom and gloom. I mean, did you have any thought that what you're drilling down into would have sort of a larger context in 2025?
Yeah, I mean, that when we were making it, we couldn't have predicted that Trump would return to the White House. So yeah, as you point out, Kimmy's struggles are very very timely again today with the kind of people that you encounter on social media, and we certainly see the same thing. And so, yeah, it's just so crucial to have people realize that this is something that's beyond any one political moment. And frankly, we've seen the impact that the film has had on college campuses. We've been invited to Harvard, Princeton, Cornell, UCLA, USC, places where films like this, perspectives like we have, really aren't welcome, shall we say? And we've said we've had tremendous response from students, from professors. I mean, some professors give us pushback, but we welcome that. But the students themselves have been fantastic, and they tell us things in anonymous questionnaires like, I'm stronger than I was told. We need to tell kids more about this. They speak to how truthful and honest the movie is and how it reflects their experience in the larger world. So this is a story that has staying power, and it's a story that we've found it's not just about preaching to the converted. Although if you already don't like DEI, I think this will be a good movie for you. But it's a way in our space, we don't see a whole lot of this, where people are so often so eager just to preach to the converted. But if we really want to make progress, if we really want to make the world better, we can't just do that. We've got to engage with people who don't see things the way that we do. And we're proud to say that we've done that with this movie. And it's been amplified by people who, are inclined to agree with us, like Elon Musk and Dr. Drew, but also, the Today Show. The Today Show publicized it with an interview. Newsweek, all these outlets that would usually scorn a movie with this point of view have been very receptive to it.
Courtney, I want to drill down into the teachers, the professors who are sharing some of these views, microaggressions, sort of the victim mentality. I'm going to be generous and assume that they mean well. They think that this is the best path forward. Have you seen any examples of professors maybe questioning what they've been doing through exposing your film to different campuses? I'm kind of curious from that perspective. Again, I don't want to demonize these people. I think they want the best. I hope. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, well, one of our campus screenings that was hosted by a professor who's a huge fan of the book and of the film and invited us out there, promoted the campus screening very much, and was expecting about 200 people to show up, a combination of students, professors, and administrators, and about 15 or 20 people showed up, and he was pretty convinced that our posters were torn down from the student center walls, and that it was professors who were spreading the word that don't go see this movie. So that's one example of professors.
We can say, I think we're fine in saying that was Cornell, and not only.
Okay, I didn't know if we could say that.
Oh yeah, and they had signed up to attend, and then en masse didn't attend, and then our posters were torn down, and so as Courtney pointed out, our host thinks that it was a coordinated effort, and it's just sort of stupid. This is supposedly, and these were professors and administrative staff who were kind of in the counseling departments and things like that. So the very people that we hope to reach the most. And what are they modeling? They're modeling that if you disagree with somebody, you do what? You pretend like you're going to hear them out, but then boycott. And then tear down their posters. What?
And we have friends who are professors and have been working in academia for decades who watched the film and said, I don't see so much of that on my college campus. I don't see so much of that divisiveness. So, but that could just be our campus. So we've had a very mixed response from educators and administrators and professors. As Ted mentioned, we're very happy to say that overwhelmingly the students, the target audience, well, really it's the students in that generation and their parents who are the people we're really trying to reach with the film, have been very moved and very inspired and connected to it in a very positive way. There used to be a time where college was a place you went to be challenged. You wanted to have your beliefs and your point of view challenged and pushed so that you could show your stuff, show what you know, show what you think and why. And it just feels like so often these days, people are very afraid to really speak their minds. Saeed, who's one of our interview subjects, speaks very well to this. He immigrated to the United States just to go to an American university from Africa.
Yeah.
And he was so excited, and he had these visions of a Dead Poet Society and Robin Williams standing on a desk and giving speeches. And he got here, and it was like the needle scratched the vinyl. No, choose your activism, choose your team.
Yeah.
If you say the wrong thing, you won't have friends. If you say the right things, you will, and we'll tell you which is wrong and which is right. And he very sadly said in the film that he got to a point where he was two people. He was thinking one thing in the brain of Saeed, but the person Saeed was saying something else. That's very dissonant. I mean, that would drive anybody crazy, right? But that's really common, and that's not going to make people happy. That's not going to help people learn and know more about each other. Jonathan Haidt has a wonderful anecdote. He says, we're all in this together, and our brains grow and get stronger when we encounter other brains. And if you protect your brain from things that are upsetting or difficult or different, it's like you're shooting yourself in the brain because you're not letting yourself evolve. You're not exposing yourself to things that will make you a stronger and more evolved person as you grow into an adult.
Yeah. Adam Carolla often says, I want my kids to have grit, to be able to kind of persevere through tough situations. And now you guys work in the independent film realm. It's never easy. It's a struggle to get the money, all the financing, the distribution, everything's tough. I totally get that. But were there any unique challenges to making this film, or was it sort of just the usual, hey, we don't have Sony behind us or Warner Brothers, and we'll have to kind of bootstrap it as you go? Because I know that you guys do that so well.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, we did. COVID was tough. Although it's funny you mentioned Sony. We actually we pitched it for a major studio. I can't say which one in 2020, which was about the worst time to pitch a project like this. But it was extremely illuminating. So when you ask the biggest roadblocks, I mean, Courtney and I make what we call uphill movies, and everything from raising the money to distributing it to publicizing it, it's an uphill challenge. If we had different points of view, it'd be downhill movies. But this was, just to give you a brief flavor of our encounter with the studio. They were interested enough to take the movie, but had never actually read the book, seemed to know almost nothing about it, and then very quickly thought that it was somehow anti-BLM. So this was before we had shot any footage.
Yeah.
And they were terrified and they literally said, all it would take is one person on Twitter, back then it was still called Twitter, to say, like, why did this studio greenlight this movie right after George Floyd? And that would apparently create this it would torpedo not just the project, but it would have blowback to their corporate partners. And they didn't like the fact that I was a cis white male director. They thought it would be better if they had a different director to sort of absorb the inevitable blowback that was going to come. And now they like the idea of addressing the Gen Z mental health crisis, but they were just so unhinged in how they saw the world. And here we're making a movie. You saw it. This is to benefit students of every color, of course. It has, we had literally shot nothing, so it couldn't have been anti-BLM. It was just such an episode of the cowardice and conformity that we talk about so often that still plagues the culture. I mean, people are talking about the end of woke and all of this. I hope that's the case. I think that I actually have a more negative take on that. I think all these ideas are far too ingrained to be wiped away with executive orders, unfortunately.
You worked, I think it was 2015, was Can We Take a Joke? And it was certainly about as prescient as No Safe Spaces was a couple of years later. From my perspective, I do think I've seen progress in the comedy realm. Tony Hinchcliffe. We've seen roasts come back.
Sure.
Joe Rogan survived a pretty significant cancel culture attack, as did Dave Chappelle. You guys, the experts here, not me. What are your thoughts on that? Looking back at the film and looking at the culture today.
Yeah, I mean, it's so on the one hand, I'm baseline is me, negative guy, but I do acknowledge what you said. So the world is complicated, so there can be green sprouts, but there's still a dark overlay to everything. So to take an episode like Chappelle, totally agree with you, Christian. That was great. Netflix finally showed some spine. They stood up to the mob. Chappelle survived. Unfortunately, in talking with young comedians, I think the message that sends is that look at what they did to a titan like Chappelle. A lot of people are like, oh, cancel culture doesn't exist. Look at Chappelle, still rich and famous. And they are totally missing the point. I don't know how many times people can miss the point so badly, because it's not someone like as powerful as Chappelle. Of course, he's going to survive. Of course, he's still going to be rich and famous. But what does it do? What message does it send to the Chappelles who are 18, 19, 20 years old? Yeah. It says, avoid the following topics. It says, you better have the following opinions. Now, you don't have to, but if you want the biggest slice of the biggest pie, if you want the most fame, and that's what these people want. I mean, we've been in the entertainment industry for a lot of years, and people are driven by ideas. Some people are crazy like us, and they are driven by ideas, but most people are just driven by the usual stuff. They want to be famous, they want to be rich. And so they might kind of have an inclination to say something out of line, out of turn. But if they see what happens to someone like Dave Chappelle and how he was almost toppled because of it, they're going to say, I'm just a little schmo. I'm just starting out. I'm going to keep my mouth shut. I'm going to go with the herd.
Yeah. And I think there are some comedians who still forge ahead, but I think they're in the minority, honestly.
Right.
So,
right. And they're niche markets. There will always be niche markets. But if you want the biggest slice of the biggest pie, you have to do something else.
Have the two of you settled on a follow-up project, or is it too early for that? Or I'm kind of curious. I know this is coming to colleges. Obviously, it's available now. We'll share that in a moment. But anything that's sort of next on the horizon?
Not in relation to the Coddling of the American Mind. Our next project will actually be a narrative film, much like Little Pink House, based on a memoir called Troubled, written by Rob Henderson. It's a best-selling book, an extraordinary story about him growing up in the foster care system and surviving it, not only surviving it, thriving to the point where he went to Yale and Cambridge, and now he's practicing in his field and has a very rich, full life. But the road getting there in the foster care system was incredibly difficult and harrowing. And one of the things we love most about the book is he survives this crazy ride in the foster care system, and he gets all the way to Yale, and he walks onto campus and he's like, kind of got this "I've made it" feeling, and then he looks around. It's like, what's going on with these college kids at Yale? Protests, the tribalism, a lot of the stuff we talk about in Coddling, and that's one of the things that we connected with Rob so well on too. So it was like going from this rough and tumble world into this very elite world that was almost even more strange and foreign than the world of the foster care system.
Gotcha.
Right. And so,
by the way, a quick plug, like you mentioned, Little Pink House is a terrific movie. It's one of those films, whenever people approach me and say, well, I haven't, what do you recommend, or what's under the radar, or what have I not seen? I was like, check out that one, because it's a wonderful movie.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
One last question. The movie captures, of course, the book does as well, that what we're discussing in this coddling, I guess, evolution, it happened fairly quickly. I don't know if it was 2012 to 2014. There was a time element there that it just kind of went on rocket fuel. Ted, I think I know your answer, because you're the negative Nelly here. Is there the chance it could fade as quickly? Is there any hope there? Or do you think this is the kind of thing, once it's entrenched, it's going to take some blood, sweat, and tears to kind of work through it?
I will stick with my negative Nelly. So yeah, I mean, everybody still has smartphones. Everybody still has social media. Everybody still has retweet buttons. The universities, I think, despite what's what's going on right now will continue to receive something like $500 billion per year in taxpayer subsidies. So I think that's where a lot of the problem starts. Unfortunately, a lot of the professors who are replacing the older professors, the younger generation, is even more strident than the ones that they're replacing.
Yeah.
So I believe me, Christian, I want to be optimistic. And again, there are some things to be optimistic about, but I think the broad strokes is like we've really got to focus on this for the long term. It's not going to be eradicated with some executive orders.
Yeah.
This is it's a long cultural process, and I think these constituencies are so deeply entrenched and often funded by other people's money that it's very hard to just wipe it away in one election cycle.
Yeah. I think the follow the money term comes to mind. Any last thoughts, Courtney?
No, I mean, this is, we're just so appreciative to you to let us spread the word about Coddling of the American Mind. As Ted said, the coddlingmovie.com is where people can see it. Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play. And it's always just great to talk with you, Christian, and thank you for your support of us and for our work.
Oh, my pleasure,
Very
guys.
grateful.
You got great stuff. And do check out the movie. I'd have to say, maybe don't watch it alone. Watch it with friends. Watch it with family members. I think it's the kind of movie that really begs for a great post-film discussion and to kind of go through some of the meatier topics. And it's, sometimes I say movies can be like eat your vegetables because there's a lot of good information, but this is a very entertaining, engaging film. And obviously you guys are a huge part of that, but also these kids are just so amazing. And I couldn't help just reaching out to them. Obviously I'm a different demographic and I'm much older than them, but I don't know, they just seem to have bright futures ahead of them, but they went through some tough stuff and they were kind enough to share it. I think that's really important. So thanks both of you. And I hope you all come back to Denver at some point. We'll get you on a local radio show and spread the word about all your projects.
Great.
Thanks so much, Christian.
Thanks, Christian.
Your character actor of the week is John Carroll Lynch. Well, before we go, I want to give a quick shout out to the Megyn Kelly Show. They were kind enough to have me back on their program. Earlier this week, I was with Link Lauren, who is just hysterical. And we were talking about Snow White, Alec Baldwin, a lot of pop culture issues. Absolutely had a blast. But let me tell you, the team behind the show, top-notch, professional, kind and sweet, helpful, just aces all the way. So, Megyn Kelly is one of the people I really trust in the media landscape. And that group is shrinking and shrinking almost every day. I feel like more and more influencers and more talking heads are losing their way, or if maybe losing their mind in the case of a Candace Owens. It's a weird state of affairs, but I feel like Megyn Kelly has really kept her values on straight. I feel like I can trust her when she says things. She seems to dig into topics beyond the surface, and she'll disagree with people on the right when she needs to disagree with people on the right. And that's important too. So thank you, Megyn Kelly, for having me on the show. I hope I can pop up again with or without the great Link Lauren, but I appreciate it. Well, that's it for the show this week. Again, thank you to Radio America for having me as part of their great podcast lineup. If you get a chance, check out HollywoodInToto.com. It's my home base, my website. Over 10 years old now, and it's like the show, The Right Take on Entertainment. Updated 7 days a week because there's no rest for the weary, even when your host happens to have a cold and is just struggling to get by, which is what's going on right now. Again, I appreciate your time, appreciate your support, and have the best week possible. Doctor's orders.